Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guildhouse. I am your host, Matthew Whitby, and this is a weekly podcast where I sit down with, creators all across the DMs Guild and just chat about their processes, how they get involved, or how they got involved, and just hang out with cool people. And I'm overjoyed. I was about to say over thrilled.
Overthrilled? No.
Gordon McAlpin, thank you so much for taking the time to
Adequately thrilled.
Adequately
thrilled. I'm definitely adequately thrilled to be here.
No, that's good. I don't want to set the standard too high. As long as you come away from the experience going, that was a podcast, then
I was like, that was an adequate time.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
Nice. So let's not mess around. Let's jump straight into it. So that anyone listening who maybe haven't heard of like what you do on the DMs Guild, what would be your sort of your synopsis or your overview of what sort of products are you known for?
I don't know that anybody knows me by name unless they are a creator on the guild, because what I do is, I'm mostly a graphic designer. I also do a little bit of illustration, and I've written or contributed to one book and written another that just came out, and we'll talk about that more later.
We will.
But I'm like, people who do know me for my DMs Guild work know me best for doing the book design for today, Elminster's Candlekeep Companion, which debuted at #1 in the charts.
So I think awesome. So when this comes out, this will be Thursday. So
yes.
You can just be the gold bestseller, the adamantium bestseller.
I'm gonna say Electrum. I think it'll get to Electrum. But yeah, it's doing great today. And my previous collaborations with Anthony Joyce, Weekend at Strahd's, The Blood Hunter, Heir of Orcus 3 and 4. We've developed a really productive, I think, working relationship.
Yeah.
And we've been making some really good looking books, and I don't have anything to say about the content, but
they look good. Like my part,
they look good.
Great.
Yeah, they look good. They look great.
I'm always kind of fascinated to hear, because obviously when I had Anthony on, and also Justice at some point, talking about almost like the dynamic duo that he Anthony hands down, and he brings you on for almost every project and stuff like that. How did that? I'm curious, how did that business relationship start? I don't know if I actually asked.
Well, it started about a year ago. So when I first started getting into the guild, or kind of circling the guild, really, it was a little over a year ago. I was kind of looking for other areas to find freelance work. I guess I should back up for a few seconds and say that I'm a full-time freelance graphic designer, illustrator, animator, and I do a lot of creative projects that are more self-driven. For about 12 years, I did a comic script called Multiplex. And then that ended a few years ago. And since then, I've been doing an animated web series based on the same characters called Multiplex 10. And but alongside that, I do graphic design work. I've always loved book design, and I've always wanted to kind of get back into that. And so in order to kind of get some basically portfolio pieces and get some more work in doing book design, I was looking around for where I could find projects to work on, creators to hook up with, because I don't want to write everything myself. If you write and illustrate and design a book, it takes you about 4 months.
You speaking from experience there.
I am speaking from experience, yeah. But yeah, so if you're working with other great talented people, you could just pick out books. I think when we did the Fall of Elturel book, that kind of expanded on Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus a little bit, from concept to completion, it was 3 weeks.
Wow.
Between maybe a little bit longer than that, maybe weeks before I got involved, but sorry, my nose is itchy. I don't know why. It's a pandemic thing where like all you want to do is touch your face. But so Anthony and I think that was Justice also. Yeah, Anthony and Justice. I sure hope they co-wrote that one. And then to me, and that used all stock art and stuff like that. So it was really quick to pull and you can't just do that. You can't do that by yourself. It's too much, especially if you have to make paying bills, pay your bills. But yeah, so I wandered off topic. A little over a year ago, I was looking for those work, and I posted a short series of posts to a blog, Polyhedral RPG, which is a site of my own. There's only like 5 posts on it now, but I posted the first 2 or 3, and I was a little snarky in them. Some people didn't like that. Mea culpa. I was a little too snarky in them, but it was about how to do better book cover design, the importance of book cover design, the importance of how you could get better art for cheaper by doing royalty shares with illustrators. All of which I've done all of this myself since then, but it was kind of written from an outsider's perspective, and I've since learned a little bit of the nuances that I wasn't previously privy to. But yeah, so I posted those to Polyhedral, and I think the first one got a little bit of attention. Some people shared it, and out of that, Christopher Willett and Anthony Joyce both contacted me, and I think maybe 1 or 2 other people. But Christopher Willett and I ended up doing the Creature Compendium of Ravnica, which I think is now a gold bestseller. That was my very first DM's Guild title.
Oh, no, that was
and it just turned gold, I think, in the last week. But yeah, I mean, I've been lucky with the people that wanted to work with me, and I think that my work is what it is. It speaks for itself. Some people like it, some people don't. But I try to kind of start from the official 5e thing and kind of build off of that. Some books are a little bit more faithful than others. Obviously, the Elminster's Candlekeep Companion, we were trying to make it look as official as possible.
Yeah.
So like watercolor edges on all of the illustrations and stuff like that. And some of the books I get to go a little crazier with.
I imagine Weekend at Strahd's being a sort of outlier in that.
Yeah, well, Weekend at Strahd's was definitely trying to channel the 80s in a lot of different ways. One being the hideously gaudy border treatment, but which is like straight off of a paper cup or something like that. But
actually, was it? So I guess my next question, so when did you kind of make that transition from going, okay, well, all the stuff or most of the stuff I'm posting on the DMs Guild is my graphic designer work, to maybe I want to dip my toes in and do a little bit of I want to write the words and then fit them in.
Well, it's funny. I started writing like a homebrew. It was originally going to be like OGL, a homebrew campaign / setting. And when I started working on guild titles, doing a series of books with Anthony, obviously Creature Compendium had long since come out, and a few other people in there as well. I started, feeling like much more familiar with the structure and the kind of format of these books, and started kind of crystallizing how I would want to write them too. I have a master's degree in interactive design, and I know a lot of people just instantly assume that means like web stuff or mobile apps. But for me, it was about electronic publishing.
Okay.
and because I'm weird. And I want to go into the least lucrative end of interactive publishing.
It has technically paid off, so you know.
Yeah. But yeah. So I studied a little bit of interactive publishing, and taking a game design class is actually kind of what got me back into playing D&D on a regular basis. I played a little bit when I was a kid. I kind of forgot it for decades, I guess.
Yeah.
And you know, taking a game design class and looking again at D&D from an interactive design perspective, just got me really excited about it, and I started playing it. And a couple of years later, I just really like being in the D&D world, you know? And so that's one of the reasons why the DMs Guild titles, working on the DMs Guild titles are so great, is that I basically get to live in D&D, because you can't play D&D for like, you know, 27 hours a week unless you're like in Critical Role or something like that. And
it's kind of fascinating, because like I guess it's you'll kind of have like a similar story to me, except like I so my undergraduate and stuff, I did creative technologies with a computer game focused, and now that I've moved on to still doing a games focused PhD. But that's how I came at D&D, from like a game design perspective, and it was kind of interesting to sort of like pry it apart in that sense, and then you sort of see all these sort of like the underlying mechanics, and you can sort of see of like, okay, I can sort of like break this apart. And then I imagine in going through and being a graphics designer for so many different types of products, you can sort of see of like, okay, there's a trend to all these parts that you can sort of now pull apart.
And because I kind of have this very technical approach to graphic design, I've done print production, which is the technical end of graphic design, for, you know, a good chunk of my career. Because I have this very technical mindset, I'm always kind of pulling apart things, even when they're, you know, just game mechanics. And so, you know, not to say that I'm like reading these books trying to say, well, I could make that better, but it gives you ideas for how you might try something maybe differently, or something new that you hadn't even seen before. You know, so it's you get a lot of inspiration when you're reading these books, as you know. And so when I'm going through designing the books, I do read them somewhat.
I also, read it, you know.
I mean, you know, it's different when you're proofreading something to look right instead of read right. I'm not the editor, although, you know, I do have a writing background as well, and so you know, I have editorial knowledge, but I'm not like an experienced editor.
So I guess like kind of that leads into my next question then, of like, obviously, so going from like graphic design work into, I guess, like brain work. And yeah, as of like this recording, you've recently, you know, released your first standalone title. I guess, would you call it a standalone, like Death by Goblins?
I think I called it a solo project earlier today, because it's my first thing that doesn't have anybody else's name on it. It's I wrote it, I designed it. Well, not anybody else's name on it in terms of like other creators. Rachel Savicki did edit it, and then I ruined it. But yeah. So I mean, I wrote it, I designed. I'm the only game designer on it. I'm the only illustrator in it. For better and for worse, it's me. So
my question then, following on from that, then, is like, so what was your creative process behind that then? So like, where did the idea start? Like, was it like mid someone else's project? You were just like, I need more goblins. This is not.
You know, it actually came out of the RPG Writer Workshop. I'd written a few little bits of mechanics here and there, and I'd contributed some encounters to Baldur's Gate City Encounters with Anthony and Justice and Anne Gregerson. But those are pretty small. But I'd also been kind of developing the plot for this other project that I haven't. I mean, I talked about it a little bit, but I don't want to talk about it too much because it's going to evolve. But it was for a different adventure, and basically that homebrew thing that I was mentioning earlier just kind of retrofitted into the Forgotten Realms. While I was doing that, I had a couple of other ideas that I really liked kind of playing around with in my head, and I saw that the RPG Writer Workshop was starting a new session up, so I wanted to find something small
Yeah.
that I could use as a one-shot adventure for that. And I knew that it was going to be bigger than most of those, because most of the RPG writer workshop things, nobody's doing all their own illustrations, because that would just blow the 3-week timeline, and absolutely it did. But even besides that, the writing of it kind of blew up a little bit, and it grew from a one shot to 70 pages, with it all being laid out and stuff. But I just kept wanting to add more stuff into it. But a lot of
sorry. I was going to say, with adventure writing, you can it can get away from you. It's very easy to be like, you know what, it would be nice to just write just one more scene, and then one scene is like 5 pages, and you're just like, oh, maybe a little bit more.
Right. Yeah. There were a couple of times where I had to be like, okay, no, I'm not going to add anything else. This doesn't add anything. It's just more. Sometimes knowing like what's really thematically on point helps to like keep some of that scope creep away, because like I basically knew that the goblins, of course, they need a little bit of variety. They need a little bit of differentiation between them. So that was a big part of the adventure. The map was a huge part of the adventure, because the middle portion of it is open world, kind of. You're trapped in a goblin lair, and you have to get out. And you could do that sneaky, you could do that loud. It's up to the players. But beyond that, spoiler warning, the ultimate big bad, slight spoiler warning, the ultimate big bad is a charm-based enchanter. He's all charm spells, he's controlling the goblins, and in some case literally throwing them around. And so anything that didn't directly involve the goblins or those charm spells was extraneous. I didn't really need it. And so it had to really stay focused towards the end to not keep writing more and more. You could just do that in another book.
Actually, I guess when I officially started and stuff like that, it was kind of just before the start of the RPG writer workshop. How did you find the process of going through that? Obviously, your project scope of taking on all these tasks for yourself, kind of
right.
Yeah, but
right. I'm not a hyper social person, so I have to admit that I did largely ignore the entire class, which is the peer review, and getting feedback from other other RPG workshop participants, I guess. I did, of course, have it play tested by 3 different tables, and had a ton of people that I've worked with before kind of have a look at it and give me some pointers. And so, I did have peer review, but for me, it was important from people whose perspective I understood a little bit better. From a creative perspective, because, you get the opinion of random people on the internet, and sometimes they have valid points, and sometimes you just don't really know where they're coming from. And so it doesn't mean anything to you. And which isn't to say that it's a valuable criticism.
Yeah, no,
or that they're wrong.
I can sort of understand why you would have that sort of like peer review part in like a workshop, because as you become more established, it's. But I can also see the idea of like looking to.
Not everybody cares about that, and a lot of people can just kind of ignore the bad criticism a little bit more easily than me, maybe. But yeah, anyway, so I didn't really participate in the forums that much, but the content was written by a lot of different people. It was structured very well. And so it really did walk me through how to organize and format the ideas that I had kind of had outlined in my head. It turned a mess of ideas for mechanics and a couple of stat blocks and a couple of magic items into a story. And that's one of the one of the things that I probably could have stumbled across on my own, but having people basically just spell it out, like this can work. Mm-hmm. And, obviously everything's going to work a little differently for everybody. But like for me, that worked really well in terms of getting the structure of the adventure. And it stayed that way from the first drafts that I was writing for that class. And then at some point when I was like, I did start to fall behind the class. And so I only went through the last parts of the class after it was technically over. Yeah. But you get to download the course content, and so I did refer to that as well in terms of the balancing monsters and things like that. But yeah, so it I found it really useful, absolutely worth the cost, which is very modest. And I do think other people might have found it even more useful, because obviously when it comes to like how to lay out your book, I'm like, I don't really need that part.
I think was it you participate in the classes for the parts that you find most
right. The writing and game design parts were definitely incredibly useful for me. There were a couple of small parts that I already knew a little bit about. So.
No, awesome. And I'll kind of leave that into like my next question of like, okay, so sticking with like the writing. So with Death by Goblins, was there any particular part of the project that is your favorite or was your favorite?
Making the characters, making the characters. I also include like the NPCs and the goblin stat blocks. But like making the big bad, Elias, he's an elf enchanter. Making him, it's basically like role playing or rolling up a dream PC, but a dream evil PC. That is how on even some of the other stuff that I've been kind of sort of working on. I always like to start with just making character sheets for those NPCs. To me, like making characters is one of the funnest things about Dungeons and Dragons. And so, rolling up a character for a one shot or like, this is how I'm going to plan out my Eldritch Knight camp for another campaign. Like to me, that's like where I live when I think about D&D, and obviously the playing, the combat's great too. But so with, but yeah, so you could do that with a whole bunch of NPCs, and envisioning how they could play off of each other really gives you ideas for like how to set things up like that in terms of the adventure. It's sometimes even when it comes to the map, and stuff like that. So that's always where I start from is the characters when I'm writing something. And to some extent, there's also like a big mess of notes about any background or lore that need to be involved with the Goblin book. I wanted to be adaptable enough that people can put it into just about any Sword Coast based campaign, or really any D&D campaign, because it's largely setting neutral. Like the first chapter takes in Phandalin, but that's only because I think over D&D campaigns probably start in Phandalin. So it just did that to make it easily adaptable. You could just pick it up and slide it into whatever they're called, the beta.
Was it Lost Mines? Lost Mines.
Lost Mines. You could just slide it in like right around when they're messing around with Lost Mines and go from there. Yeah, more goblins actually, because Lost Mines starts with goblins.
True.
But I love goblins.
I must admit, as someone who's also written a goblin-based product, I feel your love. It's
I think goblins and orcs are highly underrated as D&D. I know the orcs are
very topical,
little topical right now. I think they're greatly underestimated as a feature in Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, and part of that is because I don't want to get into a big political discussion about it.
The goblin side of things is that goblins are very versatile. And
Yes.
they can allow for that sort of like comedic levity, or you can have a big goblin whose weapons are throwing other goblins, and that works in itself. But to flip the coin to the other side, then, was there any part about this project that you necessarily didn't enjoy?
I hate proofreading. I must have done like 4 or 5 proofreading passes on my own, independent of the editors. But again, a day after release, I'm updating it one more time to fix a couple of mistakes.
They slip through.
I'm a good speller, so I am a very good speller. So if a typo, I'm serious though. I'm very good at spelling. I'm pretty good with grammar. I'm bad at editing because I just have like 3 different versions of the sentence in my head all at the same time, and they all just want to get out into one sentence.
Yeah. I mean, that's space. That's just, you're saving space if you get 3 sentences in one line. That's
So I mean, I have a writing background, or technically a writing degree. Also, I don't know, I'm overeducated. But yeah, so that's the part that it's like at that point, like everything's done. I just want it out.
Yeah, it's those
I drew all the pictures.
And it's always when sometimes when you're finding those like small mistakes after, obviously you write in I don't know if it's the same. I take it you just write in a Word document or like an like Google Sheets, and then it's all like.
Well, I started to, but I made the stupid mistake taking things into InDesign a little early.
Yeah,
too early.
I was going to say, because when you're the only person in that process, it's sometimes tempting to I can sort of 2 birds, 1 stone. I can just, right, and then. Right.
Well, I mean, to me, it was like I thought it was done, but no, that was about 8 fewer pages.
So actually, if you don't mind, then to sort of like flip those questions about your favorite and least favorite things from the writing side to the graphic design side.
Okay.
How does it differ when it comes to like being like involved in that part of a project?
I mean, it's different in the sense that well, I mean, I feel like it'd be very similar that if you were hired to write something, as opposed to kind of coming up with something on your own. Like when I did the Baldur's Gate City encounters, they were, we divvied up all of the neighborhoods, and so I had a sort of a creative brief that went along with that. It's like I'm writing an encounter. It takes place in this neighborhood that is built off of lore from the Baldur's Gate, whatever it was called, the book on Baldur's Gate. Well, I mean the
Enchiridion.
Yes, that one. So it's built off of lore, and so you have like a framework to go from. And so with graphic design, it's a similar project or process. You what kind of book are you going for? Is it going to be super faithful Wizards of the Coast? Like I would say the 2 Baldur's Gates, but especially the Elminster's book. That one is like me really like 100% trying to look like Wizards made this book. It's not my favorite kind of project to work on from a creative standpoint because it's less creative, but it's incredibly fun to work on from a technical perspective. Figuring out how to do the watercolor blends in and drawing all of them,
so drawing the things behind the images.
Right. They're the little purple splash that went behind the characters. I did that. Or some of it. Some of it's creating a lot of masks and a little bit of retouching work, and so but it's very technical, and so those are like kind of low creativity, very highly technical projects. Then there's kind of the middle where it's clearly 5e inspired, but we want to make it look like its own thing.
Yeah.
And so like that would be like the Orcus books, where one of them has kind of a sci-fi but PSY sci-fi. This is sort of like a psionic sort of bent to it. It's supposed to look a little science fiction-y, but in a D&D sort of way. And then Era of Orcus had more of a Cthulhu creepy horror, early 20th century kind of thing going, or at least that was the intent. And so like those projects are a little more fun for me because I get to explore a little more visually. Sometimes we, I can have some input on the visual direction. Sometimes Anthony has a really clear idea of what he wants. Like when he hires, he hired the illustrators for both of those before I'd done anything for them. And so like I wasn't art directing the cover on those, but I was working with I was working with the cover artists in order to develop a title treatment that goes with their illustration. And like, for me, that's a really fun collaborative process. I love doing the title treatments. That's often where I start. In fact, actually, I just remembered, I forgot to say this. Death by Goblins came of a fake title I had made when I was just kind of coming up with random book logos to show like, this is what I can do, hire me.
So actually, sorry, that's a great thing. As a layman, so what exactly does a title treatment entail?
So the title treatment it's basically just the logo for the book. But in the case of Elminster's Candlekeep Companion, it's white text with a black outline in a particular font at a particular size. As title treatments go, you don't need creative skill to make those. For me, the more fun ones are where it looks a little bit more designed, a little bit more like a logo, where you get to play with type a little bit more, draw new elements. I'm not really a calligrapher in that sense, but playing with type and being somewhat of an illustrator, I could make things that are a little more unique.
Was it like how the Lich Stole Christmas? Would that be?
Yes. Well, that one again. I really enjoy this, and it kind of ends up being sort of a hallmark of my design work. Is I really enjoy taking visuals from other sources. So with the How the Lich Stole Christmas cover, that was clearly Dr. Seuss. Yeah. I mean, I was imitating Dr. Seuss for the title treatment, and I can't remember the name of the illustrator, but yeah, he fantastic job on doing the illustration with that. But yeah, it's, to me, there's a fun technical challenge in making something look like it's part of this other thing. And I think that's, it's especially appropriate when you're doing books for the DMs Guild, because, DMs Guild books are officially and technically licensed products. They aren't canon or whatever, but they are, in point of fact, licensed products. And, so like, I feel like it's important on a couple of different levels to design a book that looks familiar to the people using them. Not just looks like D&D, but also it's organized the same as a D&D book is. If you look at a stat block, you and somebody like jumbles up the strength, dexterity, con, scores, you'd be like, what are you doing? And down to the spacing kind of go along with that. Like, you want things to be organized visually in a way that any DM could pick it up and look at it and know where to find the information that they need. That's part of information design. To me, that's part of a graphic designer's job. And, some designers or non-professional designers don't value that as highly as I believe that they should. Obviously, if you're doing something that's like a more of an art book type of D&D adventure, then you could get away with doing anything you want. But if you're trying for something that's going to appeal to a mass audience, or trying to appeal to a mass audience, you want to follow those design cues, not just visual ones. You could change up some of the visual ones, because they change up the visual ones every book or so. Different chapter headers, different page borders, but within the text itself, you want it to follow that same pattern. Design patterns communicate a lot to readers.
It's the kind of things that people like, especially like just looking at both. It's kind of subconscious. Like, when you're looking at like a 2-page spread, whether it kind of adheres to like the D&D format and stuff like that. And like I said, you would be able to see from a mile away if the stat blocks had all the sort of stats at the bottom end, or I'm just but so I guess that kind of leads into like my next question then, of like you've given like a lot of like good advice for like people who are like moving into like handling their layout or the graphic design of their product. But what are some of the lessons that you've learned through like what are some things that you could go back to, like, I don't know, Gordon right at the start, and just be like, hey Gordon, you might want to know these things?
Well, the very first thing that I learned, I was starting to do the layout for Creature Compendium Ravnica, and I had just clean forgotten about grep. It's GREP. I don't remember what it stands for, but it's basically a little mini markup that you can do, and like wildcards and booleans and stuff. So you can search for and add or style, and you can do all kinds of stuff with it. But for stat blocks specifically, you can have it look for these phrases and bold them. Apply the style automatically. So I didn't have it built at first to do this automatically, and after like 2 hours of applying bolds and stuff to a book, I was like, I think I worked on this like 300-page catalog once that used this thing. And so I did a little research, and I was like, oh my God. And I applied that, and I think I did the rest of the book, the general formatting for the rest of the book, in 2 more hours. I had done maybe a quarter of it. So I saved myself potentially 6 hours of work by thinking a little bit smarter, thinking a little bit more automated. And the best part for like people who aren't fully invested in becoming great layout artists is that like Nathaniel Rue has an InDesign template that has all of this stuff built in. He has his styles are set up really well. We swap ideas every now and then, like the way he does the little red in stat blocks by using a custom font that has that triangle built in. I made that. Oh, no. That was me. Yeah. But he has it in his template. I first of all, I don't think like I need to put out a template that to compete with his, because I wouldn't do it that much differently. And the ways that I do things differently are in those really noodly ways that really you don't want to put in the hands of somebody who isn't an advanced user of InDesign. I think even Nathaniel's own template is a little bit more advanced.
I think literally the big, what is it? So Laura Hisbrunner, she's just released a Word template.
A Word template. That actually brings me to the second thing that I was going to say that I wish I knew. Because Laura, she is people that I've worked with on the Guild, just hands down. And whenever I had imported text from Word files, I just stripped all of the styles out and then had to go in and manually add them all back in order to make them correct. But what that did is that also removed all the bolding and the italics, and shot me away yesterday how to import that without stripping out those overrides, they're called, because they override the base paragraph settings. And I wish I knew that about a year ago, because I probably lost a good hour or two on an average project, on applying those and also finding the ones that I missed.
Yeah.
And so, because if you don't have to double check it if it's automatically done, or if you didn't remove it, you don't need to really proofread it.
It's one less job,
which is sort of the point. So there's always these little efficiencies that you learn. You pick up a trick here and there, and it adds up.
So I guess to take off your graphic designer hat and to put on your game designer hat.
Sure.
Are there any particular lessons that you kind of wish you learned earlier through the process of creating Death by Goblins? Or
don't start drawing the map too early. I mean, I do really enjoy, or I rather don't finalize the map too early, because I really like having a map.
Mm-hmm.
I really like to.
Oh, sorry. It's the slight internet delay between the two of us. I think it's caught us up a few times. Because there's almost like there's two schools of thought, which is like, I guess you either do the writing first and then you make the map to kind of allocate to that, or you create the map and then sort of like. Which I take it you kind of did like a concurrent both at the same time?
Well, I'd actually did the maps. I mean, I'd had the general idea, and I knew that there was going to be, the big bad was going to have a keep above the lair, and for that I knew he was going to have a scrying mirror. So I was able to customize the map to the vague ideas that I already had. And there were a couple of things that I added to it. Like I added the goblin catapult really late in the game. Like it was always, that was one of those things that I was like, maybe I don't need that, but
no, you do.
Yeah, but I did. And the very first thing that I drew for this was the cover, actually. And so there's this flaming goblin that's flying through the air, and the implication was that it was launched through a catapult, but I didn't actually add the catapult in until like 2 days before I released the book. And I had to like real quick draw a catapult to drop into the map where it was supposed to be and stuff like that. But yeah, I got a little carried away with it.
Well, when it's a solo project, you're allowed those sort of like last minute changes. You're just like, it's mine. I can.
Yeah, and that's one of the luxuries of working with yourself is that you're going to complain about yourself, but
like you've lived with yourself this far. You can just like
I mean, Matt, having maybe a slightly more fleshed out outline before I started it would have helped. But the RPG Writer Workshop was really good with that. Definitely not finalizing the map, even if I had like the basic, like the pencils, the rough sketches of it. One issue that came up in playtesting was that one of the groups basically took a shortcut to the final chapter, the final battle. And so they took what was conceived as a 6 to 12 hour adventure and turned it into a 4-hour adventure. And they kind of missed all of the NPCs that were in it. And so I did have to kind of contrive a way to prevent characters from going through there, which was sort of a Band-Aid on the fact that I couldn't change the map at that point, because it would have been like a day of redrawing. Ideally I would have simply moved that room to the other side of the map, and so to force the characters to go through these other areas before they could even possibly escape. And so little things like that. And that's very dungeon design specific. I think.
And I mean, like any sort of dungeon or anything you design is only going to survive so long until it's in front of players, and then they're going to find a way to sort of break it, or that's just how they do. No, that's awesome. No, it's kind of nice, to be able to sort of see those two hats, those two sides of things, and see where the designer stops, and then the sort of the technical aspects of trying to get everything fits in. To take a look into the future, then, do you have any sort of like dream projects, related to the DMsGuild that you kind of are in for?
Well, there is the dream project. The orc thing that I mentioned earlier is actually, because it's gestated in some form or another since well before like actually about 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I really do want to flesh that out. It's a question of figuring out how to do it, because I think that, obviously setting books do better, I think, in the guild than adventures in general. And I feel like this is actually a really good approach for this adventure would be to do it as a setting plus adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially updating a region of the Sword Coast, or the Forgotten Realms anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it counts the Sword Coast,
If
but
it's like
updating a region.
Yeah, that whole general mishmash.
Right. But updating a region to 5e that's been, it popped up a little bit in Storm King's Thunder, which is basically just, every you get to wander everywhere.
Yeah.
But really kind of fleshing out even a little bit more. And then kind of building a little bit more orc stuff on top of it to address some of the issues with the way that they are currently depicted. Yeah. And to also tell a really cool story that I think sheds, it has some ideas in it that are worth exploring on a slightly deeper level than chopping things up and killing everybody.
Yeah.
At the same time, you could also just approach the adventure by chopping things up and killing everybody and still have fun, which I think is the heart of D&D.
I mean, yeah.
So yeah.
Sorry, it's the same thing of well, I mean, you could design like the nicest character in the world, but you have to accept that there are going to be some player groups who just kill this person. And that's how they have their fun, and that's fine. That's great.
Yeah, it happens. Some people, everybody has different priorities when it comes to the D&D. Some people are like, I just want combat. The only solution to any encounter is combat. And so you have to fight for that.
Follow your bliss, as they say. Do whatever makes you happy. That sounds like a really. Are you like how, like, as a dream project that you sort of had? Is it gestating? Is that the right word?
I've definitely written chunks of it. I've gotten a few characters rolled up, and a couple of them aren't quite interesting enough to me yet to think that they're done. But so I've got a long time before that's going anywhere. It would be fun if once I have a better idea of how I want to approach it, to maybe bring in some other people to help with the setting aspect of it, because. And I guess I should mention that the reason this works is because the middle portion of the adventure is again an open world sort of thing. It's I'm unabashedly cribbing that from Storm King's Thunder. I thought that was absolutely. I felt like maybe it could have been handled a little better in that game in terms of giving the characters guidance of what they needed to do.
Yeah.
But the openness of that chapter, I thought, was absolutely brilliant. And to me, it was, it's one of the things that I really want to play with is how can you write a story that players can experience in sort of a non-linear way.
Yep.
So that the chapters that they wander to can essentially happen in any order, because they may need to.
Yeah.
And things that have to happen in a particular order, how can you kind of mix those together? It's an interesting game design challenge, I think, to juggle that. And that's another one of the things that I'm interested in with this dream project. Because there wouldn't actually be a ton of the adventure. It would be mostly the setting and the NPCs and whatnot.
And the adventure that unfolds from all that.
Yeah.
I imagine like with anything that's sort of non-linear, you have like in a game sense, you just have a lot of if statements. But then how do you get those if statements in just a lot of green boxes saying, oh, by the way, if this character is here and they haven't killed this person and they have this item.
There's a bit of that in Death by Goblins because there's NPCs that come in and they can take part in the final battle.
Yeah.
Although most of them have like 3 levels of exhaustion, so they're not going to be useful to you unless you heal them first. Yeah. But like they could be incredibly useful and they could in fact be pivotal to how things play out. So, it's it's interesting to try to account for every possibility.
Within reason, I suppose.
within reason. You know, you don't. If you start writing like a page of if-then statements, then maybe there's a larger issue.
I feel like if you were to sort of base it on modrons, you might have a pretty good out. That would be perfect. You're like, yeah, no, this is very thematic.
That might be the third thing I work on after goblins and orcs is modrons.
I think that for me as well. I've got a product that I would love to sort of work on. But enough talking about the far future. What about the nows? Are there any sort of products that you're working on at the moment that you're happy to share?
Actually, not right now. The only thing that I have kind of in the pipeline is Monsters of the City for Kwood Publishing. They just did this Kickstarter for it a few months ago, and I'm working on that with Andrew Kwood and Travis Hansen, who illustrated the Monsters of Feyland, I think it was called, and Monsters of the Underworld. And so this is like the third book in that series, and right now it's kind of just waiting for art. So at the moment I'm not working on it, but it is in my pipeline. That other than that, I'm actually mostly working on my animated web series, The Multiplex 10. We have one final episode called The End that I need to finish writing. And I'm starting to storyboard it a little bit. That you can kind of do a little bit organically if you know where the scenes are.
I'm curious, from like start to finish of an episode, how long does it take you to kind of churn through?
It varies very greatly. Yeah. I would say animating a minute takes about a week, and then writing it usually takes about a week. This one took a lot longer because
it's a finale.
One, it's a finale. Two, it happened at the weirdest possible time for something that is set in the movie theater industry, because there are 0 movie theaters open right now. And so that had to become kind of like pivotal to the episode.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to do it in an insensitive way, and we didn't want to do it in a heavy way, because it is a comedic web series. Yeah. And so yeah, we needed to approach that with some delicacy, and I think we found a good joke to ground it all around, and so I'm working on that one. But it'll probably take me about 3 to 4 weeks to finish that. Okay. Maybe, fingers crossed, because it's going to be a little bit longer of an episode. But because everybody's wearing masks, I don't need to do the mouth animation.
I should take some time.
It'll just be a lot of Optimus Prime talking.
Nothing necessarily immediately in the pipeline for the DMsGuild then?
Nothing at the moment. I mean, the next book for Anthony is definitely coming up. But no, I don't have. I've fielded a couple of quotes, but I haven't been actively pursuing them because I've got this web series episode on my plate. Once that's starting to get done, if I don't have any more DMsGuild stuff on my plate, I'll be talking about it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I think because at the week of this interview and stuff like that, you kind of have had like a huge week in terms of publishing out on the DMsGuild. Yeah. So I would understand if you want to just
very big week.
Lean back a little bit.
I mean, I just came out with the Investigator's Companion for MT Black. That's a Whispers of the Dark drive-through RPG book. And of course, Death by Goblins just came out, which like that. Honestly, after that, I feel like I ran a marathon a little bit because that last minute flurry of writing and rewriting and
getting that cat hole in.
It was intense. Yeah, it was intense. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of taking it easy a little bit.
well deserved. Well deserved.
Yeah.
No, awesome. And I guess sort of like bringing this interview to kind of like a roundabout mm-hmm. close. Then, are there or like how many or who? Sorry, take 3 on this.
Sure.
I won't. Like I said, luckily there's no editing in this, so I don't have to do anything. it's the flubs stay in. But no, I was going to ask if there was anyone in particular in the DMsGuild community that particularly inspires you.
Honestly, I'm not saying this to blow smoke up his butt or anything, but Anthony Joyce is honestly one of the most inspirational people I've known in my year in the guild. He's a very good writer. He's a really a really strong project leader, because he knows people who are good at what they do. He lets them do their jobs. He keeps people from butting heads too much, which it happens. But yeah, like projects with him just go smoothly. They're always, to the extent that I can get away with it, really creatively interesting.
Yeah.
Again, with the Elmister's thing, I was, adhering closely to the wizard style, but I still had some room to work within there to play with some ideas that I wanted to.
Yeah.
It's certainly not just a mercenary thing. These are fun projects to work on. And he is really good about supporting the work of people he doesn't work with too. And in advocating for paying, other people in the guild better.
Yeah.
Because, paying people better means that everybody does better. It just, it's I don't know. It's important. It's an important topic, and like I know nobody in the guild is getting rich off of their books, but like you can make it's pretty clear to me, I think, that good books with good production values can do really well, and that could in turn fund these bigger budgeted books. And so like we can grow the DMs Guild audience by making professional looking work. And so paying fair wages attracts professional level talent, more so than just loving D&D already does, because obviously that's part of it. I'm not saying it's all about the money, but it really helps. The difference between spending a week designing a book and 2 weeks designing a book is night and day. You can do so much more when you have the resources to back you up. And a lot of those resources really just are time, 9 times out of 10. So yeah, like he puts his money where his mouth is, tries to pay the collaborators fairly, and he's not a fountain of negativity in social media. He's just a really good guy, and I'm actually I'm proud to say that he's my friend also, even though I've never actually met him in person. But like, he's my bro. We've talked, like, even when we don't have a project going, we talk almost daily. So, he's just a good guy.
I think that's like almost like an undeniable fact about the DMs Guild community is Anthony is a nice guy. It's like, anyone who has anything to say about him is always
right. I'll be the first person to admit I'm a little surly. I'm a bit of a curmudgeon. I vent on Twitter. So I have flaws, but Anthony is a great guy. So,
awesome! I coming from someone who's worked on so many of his projects back to back and back, I think it means that much more, because you could say that you've seen every side of Anthony.
I've definitely seen sides that are not public.
I think no.
But that's all I'm saying.
You cannot tarnish this man. He's a beacon.
Oh no, to me, it wouldn't tarnish it at all. Yeah. It shouldn't tarnish anyone's opinion of him at all. He's a professional. He understands when dirty laundry needs to be aired, which is pretty much never. And he's a professional. That's all. I'll leave it at that.
I feel like I agree with you, because otherwise I may have to rebrand this the Anthony Joyce podcast, which I mean it probably would do just as well, but gotta keep it on brand.
Probably.
Yeah.
It'd be Electrum after a day on the DMs Guild. I don't know. Yeah.
But anyway, moving on swiftly. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and have this chat with me. This has been a blast. It's been
great. Thanks for having me.
I have two kind of like last questions. My first one is, how can people get news about you?
Okay. I'm sorry, first of all, but you can follow me on Twitter.
Like,
Yeah.
pre-warned, they know what they're getting into if they follow.
Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter at McAlpin, GMCALPIN, and that's probably the most reliable way. I have a newsletter. I forget about it, so I'll go and plus you'll get all this weird stuff like like animated series and
Yeah.
no. Twitter's probably the most reliable way to hear me talk about myself and my work. So yeah.
Awesome. And the kind of second question is how do you end a podcast?
I have no idea.
I don't know. I've been doing this every week. I've had to come up with something new. I just get my guests to do it now.
Yeah. No, I actually co-hosted a movie review podcast for a couple of years way back. We had zero production values, but I think we were just like, see you next week.
You know what? That's good enough. So anyway, thank you once again, Gordon McAlpin. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes, and